Hello everyone, welcome to another video. In my last video I've said that I will try to make a bleed Gladiator build with lacerate and eviscerate possibly in the late game. But by the time that I figured out how the bleed works in general, since I've never played with a bleed skill before, a lot of build guides have been published. So I thought to myself, I want to make my own build, I want to try the new Gladiator Ascendancy, I want to try dual wielding. So why shouldn't I play it with a skill that I like already? And here we are with this build guide for Frostblade's Gladiator. Before we start anything, this isn't a league starter, the budget won't be low and the damage won't be that great compared to the budget. I don't recommend this build as your first character, I will do the same myself. I will start with Archmage again, then switch to this build when I have more resources. And this is my first time making a build. The tree might not be that efficient in terms of points. So please go easy on me and let me know if I can or how I can improve it further. Another thing to mention, I've played this build as my third character ever in the game during the Crucible League. I followed the build guide of Zish back then. It's a bit of a low chance, but if you don't know him, definitely subscribe to his channel. He knows Frostblades inside out, and I've learned everything about this build from watching his videos. Before we start, one final thing. They have added loadouts to the Path of Building. This is a new feature, and I've tried to make use of it as best as I could. Whenever you select a loadout, it will load both the tree, skills, items, and the configuration. So you can select it here when you get to the POB and navigate within it without too much trouble. But this one is the one we will be taking a look at most of the time. Now let's get to the build. I will show you the mapping with the build on my character in standard so that you can have an idea about how it works. Of course, I don't have access to the new version of the tree or the new Ascendancy. This was a Trickster in the Crucible League. Here we have a pretty easy T17 map. As you can see, clear is awesome, everything freezes, and we are pretty fast even without a Mage Blood. I won't get to bossing because I really don't want to deal with totems right now. So the question is, why should you play this as a Gladiator? Even as a softcore player, I don't like dying much. So that's why I've wanted to make use of the block nodes on the Guardian Ascendancy tree. Since we have to path towards the right side of the tree, I didn't want to play this with a shield as you normally would, because most of the shield block chance nodes are located in this side of the tree and will be pathing towards this way. That's why I've decided to go with a claw and a dagger, as you can see, to make use of the dual wielding block chance and attack speed with this node on the Ascendancy. We will also be getting Lucky Block and different benefits from dual wielding as well. But later on we will get to do defensive and offensive decisions made in this build. Now let's talk a bit about the mechanics of this skill. For those of you that don't know, Frostblades is a melee skill that also shoots out projectiles when you hit the enemy, and the gem itself converts 60% of physical damage to cold. And we convert the rest of the 40% with the cold mastery on the tree. So this build works quite similar to physical to cold conversion Tornado Shot. You scale the damage with physical, cold, elemental, and critical strike multiplier modifiers. We also play with Trinity. It's a bit of a complicated gem, but in the simplest way possible. Trinity uses 3 different elemental damage types, cold, fire, and lightning. Whenever you deal damage, it calculates the lowest elemental damage type. In this case, let's say lightning. When that happens, lightning damage triggers or procs the cold and fire part of the Trinity, and vice versa. Whenever the lowest damage is fire, it procs the lightning and cold parts. So in essence, you want to be alternating between elemental damage types in order to fully proc the Trinity and benefit from its damage boost. In this build we use Heat Shiver for that. Since this is a crit based build, whenever we crit with Frostblades, we freeze the enemy, proccing the Heat Shiver and gaining 30% of our cold damage as extra fire damage. But just to be safe, we also have a flat lightning damage on any part of our gear. This item, Heat Shiver, was broken the first time I played with Frostblades. It will give 100% of cold damage as extra fire. Good times indeed. As for the leveling, you would be much better off leveling Duelist with a generic two-handed axe setup with either Spectral Helix or Sunder. But if you really want to use Frostblades while leveling, I still suggest doing it after Act 6 because the gem lost its added cold damage. It didn't really feel good before either. I couldn't make it work, but now it will be a lot worse compared to before. In this build, I will level this with Spectral Helix while dual wielding. Overall, the damage will be lower, but you would get max block quite early. Now, as we transition into the early maps, the most important here in the build are your weapons. Once you get to early maps, you should definitely look for weapons like these: added cold damage, physical damage, and attack speed. If you couldn't get your Heat Shiver, keep using Cold to Fire gem. And as we make our way to the endgame, the hardest and possibly the most expensive items to craft or buy in this build are the weapons. But also they are the most important in terms of getting damage. In this league, after the weapons, probably Taming will be the most expensive, and then the Yoke of Suffering. The rest of the gear is pretty classic. Of course, it wouldn't be this good, but you get the general idea. Now let's take a look at the defensive and offensive options in this build. In terms of defense, we have capped attack block chance in this build by dual wielding. We also get spell block thanks to this keystone, Versatile Combatant. It grants us 2% spell block chance for 1% overcapped attack block chance. We reach our block cap like this. Since we have the Lucky Mastery for the block on our Ascendancy, this block chance would be around 85% or more effective. But still, I didn't want to die as soon as my block failed. That's why I've capped the suppression for spell damage and increased my armor as much as I can with determination in order to get the most effect out of the Molten Shell. You can go with evasion if you want, but since we lost a lot of physical taken as modifiers, it wouldn't make a lot of difference when you get hit. We're also getting endurance charges in this build with Enduring Cry. That's another button to press, but I think it's really worth it. On top of that, we are ailment immune with Ancestral Vision. Since we have capped suppression, we craft our boots with chance to avoid elemental ailments. I suggest using Soul of the Brine King or Arctic Armor until you get to this point to deal with freeze. We don't have much evasion, but we blind enemies on hit, so this makes it even harder for us to get hit. We're getting blind from our weapons, but if you get unlucky, you can also get it from tattoos from the tree. We also have Fortify from our body armor. They said that they would introduce physical damage taken as elemental implicit, but I don't know which one it will be, if I'm not mistaken. Of course, that's how I remember it. So we could lose one of these modifiers on the implicits. But if we keep it, Fortify reduces the damage taken per fortification, so that's another good defense. Finally, as a defensive mechanic, we have Elusive buff from the Nightblade support. This buff grants 15% chance to avoid all hits and also a lot of movement speed, but it decays over time. So we increase its effectiveness on the tree. We don't get it from the boots since we go for ailment immunity. If you don't want to lose that, you can also use Storm Shroud instead of Ancestral Vision and craft this with chance to avoid shock at around 60%. and get the rest from the jewel that we will put on the Stygian Vice. As for the recovery, we get 20% instant life leech from the Ascendancy. That's why I didn't get 10% instant leech from the Leech Mastery. You can get it if you want, but even like this, we leech around 1.5k life with each hit. So in total, we have lucky block chance for attacks and spells, our suppression is capped, we are also ailment immune, we have the fortification and elusive buff, and have leech with around 3.5k life. This will be around 4k, I guess, with the new life modifiers to come in 3.25. Overall, I think it's looking pretty good. The only thing that I'm worried about is degen grounds, but as it stands, we have around 250 life regen, so we wouldn't die instantly. Now let's take a look at the offensive decisions. First things first, we are capped in crit chance even without the flask, but we use brittle shenanigans. The enemy must be on the brittle ground, so we might as well go with Bottled Fate to increase the damage and craft action speed on the boots for more attack and movement speed. Or you could just slap a Mage Blood and be done with it. Aside from the crit chance, we're getting a lot of multiplier from the weapons and from the tree. On top of that, Taming and Yoke increases our damage a lot due to the elemental ailments we inflict on the enemies. We are also using the Light of Meaning. This was Perandus Pact last league. I don't know how expensive this will be or how rare it will be, but this increases our damage a lot as well. And also we have some double damage nodes from the Lethal Pride. And of course also chance to intimidate. Finally, we're getting all the frenzy charges we can get from the tree as well. That's pretty much how we scale the damage. Now let's take a look at the configuration page. We're killing all the bandits, as you can see. We are level 100. As I've said, you can use Soul of the Brine King until you get ailment immune. Then after that, it's up to you, whatever you want to get. I usually get Soul of Abarat from the Minor Pantheon, but that's up to you. You can get any one of these from the Pantheons. Now we're using power charges. I've checked this because we're getting it from the Assassin's Mark, but remember this, the quality must be 20 in order for you to get power charges from the enemies on hit. Because if you kill an enemy, you will get a power charge, but against bosses, this needs to be 20 quality. And we're getting frenzy charges from this node or from this mastery on the tree. And since we have a lot of attack speed, we will get frenzy charges reliably this way. And I've already talked about the endurance charges. We are also fortified, elusive, we are leeching. We are at close range. Now you need to get this accuracy mastery, 50% more accuracy at close range. This is important because we want our hit chance to be 100%. We also use a low level precision. The enemy is blinded, it's burning, ignited and whatnot. These are all the things that we're doing. We also get intimidate from the Lethal Pride. And the enemy is also on the consecrated ground from the Bottled Fate. And this is the, of course, Guardian Pinnacle setup. As you can see, we deal around 6 million damage to Ubers. And there's also one last thing that I didn't mention about this Ascendancy, because I feel like it's bait. It's this node on the Ascendancy, War of Attrition. Now realistically, if you're playing softcore and if you're farming Uber bosses, you don't want to spend anywhere near 100 seconds in a boss fight, because if you're farming 200 or 300 of these Uber bosses, you don't want to do that. You just want to one-shot them and be on your way. That's why I didn't include it, but for the sake of baiting you, I will just do it like this. And as you can see, we have 40 million damage. So what would be this good for on a build at this budget? I don't think it will be good for anything, but if you want to map and do Ubers at the same time, if you don't want to mass farm them, then this will be maybe useful if the damage is not enough. But 6 million is more than enough to do Ubers if you know what you're doing. So that's it from this build. Now I will show you how to craft the claw and the dagger. Crafting the weapons for this build is quite straightforward actually. It's just expensive. I've crafted this before in the Crucible. So you would ideally start with an attack speed, fracture, and also the claw needs to be at least level 83. Then you just spam this with Essence of Hatred. Of course, make sure that it's deafening. And we're trying to hit added physical damage. Of course, this has quite a low weighting, so you can stop if you hit tier 2. Even hitting tier 2 requires a lot of essences, so at that point, if you think that, oh, I already spent this much, you can go for T1 if you want. The ones that I've included in the build are T1. Of course, your damage will be a bit lower if you craft a T2. Actually, let's just check it. Let's craft this with T2. Assuming that you hit this one, then you will go with prefixes cannot be changed from here. And then you will use an Ashling Slam. 100% remove the prefixes cannot be changed. And hopefully you will unveil this and hit physical damage with blind. But we hit bleeding here. Of course, if you get it, just take this. And as I said in the video, get the blind chance from the dexterity nodes on the tree. Just use tattoos on them. We don't have really a lot of problem with dex. After this, you will craft, again, prefixes can't be changed. And at this point, we already spent 4 divines only for the meta mods. And also, I don't know how expensive Ashling will be. It was around 15 divines last league. So we already spent a lot of money. The next thing we will do is to reforge critical from the harvest bench. But there's only one slight problem. Since we're reforging, there's a high chance that the suffixes will be blocked, and if we don't hit T2 or T1 crit strike chance or multiplier, the craft will be bricked. We will have to annul one of the suffixes in order to continue the craft. But let's just try our luck. Okay, if you hit something like this, then it will be really beautiful. Then you will craft critical strike chance from the bench. Of course, not this one. And try to get this as high as you can. Yeah. And the end craft will look something like this. Now let's get this to PoE and see if we lost any damage or crit strike chance. Obviously, we will lose damage. Yeah, as you can see, we lost a bit of damage and we also lost a bit of crit strike chance. Considering that you will craft the other dagger like this, it's the same process really. Considering that you craft it the same way, you need a bit more crit chance from somewhere. I didn't include a Watcher's Eye in this build because we're already stretched thin on points. But what you could do is maybe lose this one. You will lose a bit of regen, also strength. That shouldn't be too much of a problem now. And then you can just allocate a critical strike chance node and you should be fine. Okay, I've crafted the other dagger as well, the same process. And we didn't lose much from the crit chance because this already had a high crit chance. So one node in crit chance should be fine. But still, if you want to be absolutely sure, you can just lose this, get here, since this gives crit chance, get more accuracy, and you will be good to go. And you can have your point back. That's also what you could do, but of course, we went from 20 million to 17 million like this. It's up to you. You can spend more currency on the claw and the dagger, or you can just be satisfied with these ones. And believe me, these ones won't be that cheap either. Alright everyone, that's it from this build. If you have any questions, feel free to ask in the comments. I hope you give the build a chance. Or if you have any suggestions, let me know again down in the comments. I think that for a first time, it's not that bad. Of course, it can be much better. I mean, you don't usually level to 100, but still, this was a build that I was familiar with, so I went with it. So next time, I hope I can do something a bit more original. Alright. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. I'd appreciate it if you liked the video. Comment down below and subscribe to the channel. I will see you in another video. As always, have a good one.